Hey, I'm back with part two of my interview with Grant Cameron. So honored to have him on, and it's going to be a great interview. I think you're going to enjoy it. We cover a range of topics, and so stay tuned. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button, and comment below. Let me know what you think. Okay, on with the interview. Let me ask you a question. All right,
Yeah.
so getting because I'm really fascinated by what the phenomenon wants and its interactions with us when it showed itself to James Lukatsky, the floating Mobius loop, or whatever it was.
Which was, by the way, by the music for The Exorcist. You know that.
Yeah,
That was
the music for The
that,
Exorcist.
that was the album. It was on the album. It was on the album cover for the the music for The Exorcist, which
Okay,
is like
okay, I didn't know that. Interesting, interesting. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I wonder if that was a joke from the phenomenon.
no,
Can be
no, it's
funny.
real.
Yeah,
They
okay, okay, okay. But without that incident, without the creation of OSAP and later ATIP, which prompted eventually or allowed Lou Elizondo to come out of the closet and release those videos, or basically, if we hadn't had the Mobius loop, James Lukatsky's Mobius loop, we wouldn't be living in this age of semi disclosure, right? So
Yeah,
did the phenomenon have any foreknowledge of that? Did it want that?
yeah.
Is this all the creation of the phenomenon from that one incident?
It's like they asked Jim Semivan. John Alexander. The story was John Alexander didn't believe it, and then Jim Semivan said, "John, it's for real." And he said, "I just can't accept that. Who's running the show?" And he said, "They are." They're running the show. That's why they call them the others. And so you see these things. People see them as good things and bad things. So you take the example of them wanting the investigation of Skinwalker Ranch. Yeah, they wanted it. Just remember, if it had not that event, there would have been no OSAP. There would have been none of that kind of thing. The other thing that happened was Jim Semivan. If you listen to his story about having the beings in his room, and he's all upset, and he says, I'm upset they didn't ask my permission and they injured my wife, and I'm still upset about this. It's 30 years later, I'm still upset or whatever. Just remember, if he had not been abducted or the beings in his room or whatever happened there would be no disclosure. Because it was Jim Semivan in 2016. I was told by Chris Bledsoe, the big man in Washington, who was Jim Semivan, is going to come forward. And high level people are going to come forward, and they are going to say UFOs exist, and they are going to force disclosure. Jim Semivan was the guy that set it all up. He went to the three-letter agencies. He's told the story publicly. He went to the three-letter agencies, head of all the heads, and he said, "You guys can't get this out. We're going to disclose. We're going to force this thing out, and we're not going to release classified material, but we're going to get it out." And all the agency guys said, "Yeah, okay, keep us informed." And that's the whole thing. So remember, if he had not been abducted, there would be no disclosure. There would have been no New York Times article. The only guy that's going to go to the New York Times and try to force disclosure is the guy who's been abducted, who's trying to figure it out himself. And that's the whole thing. So these events are all working towards disclosure. The phenomenon wants the thing out, but they want us to figure it out. They're not going to land on the White House lawn and tell us what's going on. They want us to sort of figure out what's going on. And that's what's happening is all these experiencer guys are pushing this thing forward. Awe and mystery are what's driving science. There's no curiosity, there's no science. Nobody does anything. Everybody just says. In fact, Max Planck talks about that. In 1874, Max Planck said his professor said to him, Professor Joly said, "Max, don't go to physics. You're wasting your time. We've discovered everything." That's the perfectly wrong attitude and that's the whole thing is when you realize when you get into a sort of a state where no ego is there, when you realize what they told me, like I did a book on psychedelics. I did 27 high dose sessions of psychedelics, and what I did when I first started,
Intriguing.
um, what I did is I called the psilocybin school. So I'm never into experiences. I don't want to see anything or whatever. So I just went in and I said, okay, I'm here. I took 5 grams and I said, okay, I'm here. What do I need to know? And for the first 6, I haven't read the book. I never did read the book, but the first 6, it was definite. Within the first couple minutes, I knew what the lesson was. One was on compassion. One was on despair. One was on death. I knew, and they would give you these lessons. And so then it went on, and the messages started to change to this ego thing. And it was like, I'll leave the swear words out, but they were pretty blunt. They said, "You think you know everything? You think you know what's going on? You haven't got a clue." And they told me that at least 5 or 6 occasions. And they were really, really pushing it. They said, you haven't got a clue. And it was like, and so I got frustrated the one time. I said, what do you mean? I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. So, okay, what's going on? Like, what the hell's going on? And then this voice says, we don't know either. And I go, oh, come on, you don't know either. But I was being led around by something in the world. And that's when you see the other crossover. There was something, but I couldn't see it. And I didn't discover this till late in the game when I was doing the Alien Sky Pilots. Jim Semivan was one of the guys that said it. And when you worked on this, you suddenly pick up the clues. Nobody else would have picked this up. Jim Semivan was being interviewed by James Ian Dolly. And he says he's trying to get him to describe his beings in the room and the Michelin Men guys of the armor and on them and stuff like that. And he doesn't want to talk about it. And he said, well, the people are still working on my case and stuff like that. And so James gets frustrated, and I'll go one more question before I let him drop it. He says, was there any telepathy? And then Jim goes, yeah, that was the most interesting part. He says, I'm standing there, and I think we were on the front lawn or something, and they were standing there, and there was this being behind me. So I don't know if it was a gray or reptilian or a mantid or whatever it was, but it had this guardian type thing going on about it. And I went, guardian type thing going on about it? I says to Jim Sikowski, which side was it on? Was it on his left side or right side? Because if you go back to the crossover, you go to the life between lives, the 7,000 people. When you die, you go in front of a council between 3 and 12 people, and your spirit guide stands behind you on the left side. So I'm going, it's a spirit guide standing behind him, and it's all a game. So that before there would be angels, now they're playing aliens. The spirit guides are playing aliens. And then I started looking at my cases, and sure enough, all these people. The one guy was a U.S. Air Force retired colonel out of Los Angeles, this David guy, and he says, I'm on the ship. He says, I'm on the ship, and there's somebody behind me telling me what to do, and I can't see them. I can't. I'm not allowed to look. I can't see them or whatever. And they're telling me what to do, and they say, okay, go ahead and do it. And he said, I don't know what to do. And his voice says, you know what to do, just do it. And he puts his hands on this panel, and then suddenly he's flying the craft. And he says, it's like flying an F-16 that he flew in Iraq. And he's describing this whole thing. And then, so I'm thinking, everybody, I started realizing a lot of people were talking about somebody behind them during their experience on board the ship. So I went to Whitley Strieber. I said, hey, Whitley, you ever have anybody behind you on the ship that you can't see and they're talking to you? All the time, he said. I said, really? And it's like validating that this may be like a spirit guide thing, that this is all a play, that everybody's playing a role and we're trying to learn a lesson. We're going to come back with a lesson and it's going to teach us something like that. And then he said, because he talked about flying the craft. And he said, I'm sitting at the panel board and it's got these lights on it or whatever. He said, I'm looking at this panel board. And he says, and I thought to myself in my head, I said, boy, I'd like to steal this thing. And he says, you could hear somebody telepathically laughing behind him. And that's the whole thing. You start picking up these clues and you go like, what's really going on? Is this really aliens? Because I basically say that there's no chance that it's biological aliens. There's no way. Because you start looking at.
Well, the whole thing about, having somebody behind you telling you stuff really rings home to me. When I was a kid, I had a series of dreams. I still have them today, but they were a little different when I was a kid, about flying. I would dream about flying, and I would always have somebody behind me that I was never interested in looking around and looking at, but they were instructing me in how to fly. And
that's a basic premise of Michael Newton. He had 7,000 regressions, and all these people said the same thing. And this idea that you always have a spirit guide behind you. So if you assume that when you go into the UFO world and you assume that could be true, then a lot of stuff starts to make sense as to what's actually going on here. And because I'll always ask the questions nobody have asked. So when somebody's on board the ship, I go, hey, you saw the beings? You're on the ship of the beings? And they go, yeah. I said, let me ask you a question. Do you have any clothes on? They go, no, he didn't have any clothes on. I said, don't you think that's kind of strange? An alien's got no clothes on? Ghosts, why do ghosts have clothes on? And why do aliens not have clothes on? And then I go, you didn't have any clothes on? No. Hey, do you have any sex organs? They go, no, I never thought of it. No. And no, he didn't have any sex organs. I said, that's just not strange. He said, I never thought about it. It's happened 20 years ago. I never thought. Didn't have sex organs. Do you have any nipples? No. Do you have a belly button? No. And I said, go back to the alien autopsy, the big fake alien autopsy that was supposedly, it was a fake, but it was based on real footage, that they had some frames of footage. I said, go back and look at the alien autopsy. Does it have sex organs? No. Does it have a belly button? No. Does it have nipples? Well, if they're going to make it look like a human, like a biological, why wouldn't they have put a belly button on it and nipples and sex organs? It doesn't. That's biologically correct according to what experiencers are describing. Or the thing where the one guy, a lot of them, Antarell, the one where the thing changes. It can change from one to another. The 14 portal at Mount Shasta, there were 7 people, and I interviewed most of the people that were in that portal. And I said, "So what'd you see?" Well, Aunt Terrell was standing there, and he's like 10 foot tall, and he always referred to him like Michael Phelps, the swimmer, all muscular, and he had this tight suit on, and he was real stern looking. He had the long hair. And I say, Mission Rama, if you believe, the Greys are running the show and they're evil Greys and they're running the world, whatever, they ain't running Mission Rama. I've never, and I say, I defy you. 25,000 Mission Rama people all around the world, these groups, I defy you to find one of them who's had an experience with a gray or reptilian or a mantid. It doesn't happen. They all got this wonderful hair. They live under Mount Shasta. They're angels of God and all this kind of stuff because they're religious. They're Roman Catholic, Latino people, and they reflect the phenomena. That's what they see. They don't see grays. And so they would say, "Oh, he's standing there and he's very stern looking, and he's looking, and he's got this long sort of silvery hair and muscular, and these other 2 beings beside him, and everybody's having a different experience." So you allowed 7 people in the portal, so there's 7 people, and one's hearing this garbling. Paula Harris is all upset. She wants to get out of the portal. I don't want to be here and stuff. And all she's hearing is this voice coming, and she can't figure it out. And he's mad at me, and she's reflecting what's going on in her head. And the other people are getting messages about their life and stuff. And he's got 7 conversations going on at the same time. And that's what you see at Skinwalker Ranch. If you heard the story of Colm Kelleher, he says they're sitting there one night and they all got the Gen 3 glasses, the night vision glasses, and the thing comes over the ridge and it goes flying by, and they're all sitting there with the Gen 3 glasses. And these are all scientists. They're all looking as the thing flies by. And the end of the night, they compare notes. One saw a triangle, one saw a UFO, one saw this, one saw that, all completely different. Nobody saw the same thing. So when they're in this portal, and then the next year, there was 8 people in the portal because they had one guy was a translator. He was a Navy guy, 24 years in the Navy. Then he became an architect, and he's in there, and he's a translator, but he wasn't supposed to be in there, but he just went in with Paula because he was translating for her, and he's in there. And so then I'm interviewing these people there, and I same thing as Aunt Terrell, but this time he's a hologram. You can see through him. So, I mean, it's not a biological entity. This is something that you can start getting these things.
Could you see him?
No, I'm interviewing the people. I'm filming the people that were in, and they're all describing basically the same thing. So they're describing.
When you were there, you didn't have any visuals, like other than the UFO.
No, and that's why I said I was very disappointed when I saw. I thought there might be a portal thing, but they didn't open a portal that night.
Okay.
They don't open portals all that often. Every once, I'll tell you one really the wildest UFO story I ever heard. I'll tell you in a second. But so the second year, so this Navy guy is translating. Because they're all nobody speaks. Everybody's speaking Spanish. There's like 2 people who speak English. Everybody else speaks in Spanish. So you don't really know. You just stand up when everybody stands up, and you bow when everybody bows and stuff. You don't really. You're just sort of there for or whatever, hoping something's going to happen. So then he goes in and he comes out and he says, "I can't believe it." He says, "That's extraterrestrial. He had no experience in his life, never had a UFO sighting, nothing." And he said, "I couldn't believe it. It was an extraterrestrial. It wasn't an extraterrestrial. I was standing right there." And I said, "So it was a hologram?" "No, it wasn't a hologram." I said, "Oh yeah, Paula and all the rest of them said it was a hologram." "Look," he said, "I was close enough. I could see the lines in his face. It was not a hologram. He was as real could be." And I go, "Oh, okay." And that's the thing. You get these things where people are seeing different things based upon your perception. And John Mack said that at the very end of his life. He said, maybe it is that if you see a gray, you have fear. If you're very highly energy, sex, stuff like that, you see a reptilian. And if you're very angelic, you see an energy type being, which is what Chris Bledsoe saw. The first time he saw these tall beings, bluish green, depending what the color was, brown, bluish green, depending what kind of light was flashing on them. And then the second time when he took him to see the lady, they're in hoods, and there are these energy beings, which is the number one being that is seen. So it's like angelic type energy beings. And that's what happened in 2020 when this Shasta thing keeps going, and they keep bringing people back to the mountain. And there was a story that in 2020, another being by the name of Adama. So same thing, looks like he comes out of Hollywood, beautiful hair, gorgeous looking, all the women that fall in love with him and stuff. And he's going to come to the mountain. And because there's COVID, I didn't go. And there was the assurance that 111 people showed up, that Adama would show up. He would actually show up. So they only got 44 people because of COVID. And nothing happens till the last night. and there's 7 people, and I've got this on camera. I've got 3 of these people on camera telling the story. They didn't want to tell it because we're Latinos, you know, we're just ordinary people, we're just gardeners and stuff like this. We don't want to take the center spot for this thing, whatever. And once the interview got going, they're all fighting to talk. You know, they're telling me the story, and so they go there, and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're on this sand flat. If you've ever been there, it's like, all these events happen. They all go up this sand flat. So they're sitting there, and it's closes this Saturday night, Sunday morning. So everybody's packing up and going Sunday morning and going back home, whatever. And some people are staying down at the bottom of the mountain in a motel type thing down at the bottom of the mountain, and they're having a birthday party. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and then the one woman who's an intuitive from Mexico City says, "He's here. They're here." And then the other, it's always the same discussion. Then the others go, "I didn't know he's here. I just know he's here." It's like Chris Blesser with John Alexander. It's like, they're here, they're here. And because once you've touched the craft, once you've been one with the craft, you vibrate with the craft. So when the craft is in your vicinity, you can vibrate. You know it's here because it's vibrating. And so she says, "They're here, they're here." And so, "How do you know?" And then she says, "Look, there's a light on the edge of the forest there." And then everybody said the same thing. The Navy guys, they were saying the same thing about this. "Oh, it's just a campsite. Just somebody's got the light on at night, or whatever. It's just a campsite." "No, it's not them." He says, "No, that's them." I'm not. "Oh, they say they want us to come over there." And then the other people go, there's 9 people in this circle. The other 8 people go, "We can't go over there. It's dark." And if you've ever been to Mount Shasta, you can't see your hand in front of your face, and there's like potholes and stuff. And we're going to break our leg if we try to go across this area across there. There's no way we're going to get across there. And then oh, they say, "That's okay. They'll come here." It's just, and it's like, blah, 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 blah. It's like a herd of elephants. Like, it's this noise. Blah, 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 blah. It's these elephants, and they're sitting there. And then the weird part starts. They says, so they're coming, and they're in this, and they start to freak out. These elephants are coming, and they're starting to freak out, and they don't know what to do. And so they all grab hands, and all of a sudden they start to levitate. 9 people, and they levitate up into the air, and they're in this thing. And now they're really scared, and they're hanging on to each other. And then they start oming, and they're oming away. And these beings come in, and we got this all on camera. These people describing this, and I said to the one guy, I said, "Well, how long did it last?" He said, "I have no idea how it lasted. I have no idea." And so the beings start to ohm. So the beings are ohming, and the people are ohming, and they're up in the air, and they're levitated into the air. And
That's so cool.
and then so I says, "And it was a Dama?" "Yeah, it was a Dama." And then I you don't even know what's coming. So I said, "So," or my assistant was with me, and she says, "So how many of them were there?" And I assume he's going to say, because there's always the big guy, and then 2, like a 10-foot guy or 9-foot guy, and then 2 7-foot guys. And then sometimes they have these little guys running around with these little iPads, and they believe they're the ones that open the portal, the electronic guys that make the portal for them. But so I thought it was going to be the big guy, and then these 2 shorter guys. And then they and the guy says he's from San Francisco. They said, "How many beings were there?" And he goes, "There was as many beings as there was trees in the forest." And I went, "Holy shit!" So they're surrounded by, and if you've been to Mount Shasta, like there's tens of thousands of trees, and it's like there's thousands of these beings all around them, and they're levitated up into the air. And then I show the film, and that day they had an event earlier that day, which my friend from Chicago picked up. Nobody saw it on the film. They had this event. They're always doing this, meditation stuff. They're doing this. They call it the rose ceremony. They're all lying down on the ground meditating. They're lying in this circle in the middle of this field, and they got these rose petals. They cut out these rose petals, and everybody's got rose petals on top of them, and it looks like a mass massacre. People with all these red things on, and they're all lying on the ground. And then the one woman says, "Do I have permission to film?" And then she gets the impression, "Yeah, you have the permission to film." So she takes the camera, and this camera pans, and it goes across like this. And then they get him the lens flare. This is what started. It gets a lens flare there. And then they pan back. And the film is 1 minute and 27 seconds. Pan back, whatever. And then so they're showing my friend Jan Yonder from Chicago. They're showing him, say, "Hey, Jan, look at this. Look at this." And he goes, "No, that's a lens flare." That's because they were shooting into the trees, and the sun was in the behind the trees, and they were getting this lens flare. So, "No, that's a lens flare, but what's this?" And so as they start, the trees are there, and it's all empty, like it's a sand flat, so there's nothing there, and just this row of trees all around. So they start, and there's this, looks like somebody in a white hood, like on a white robe right down to the ground. You can't see the face, or it's all white, and it's standing by this tree. And then you can see in front of the tree, it looks like to me, it looked like a portal. It looked like it's all sort of like a square type thing in front of this tree. And it was all, you could see there's something in front of the tree, some sort of force field or something like that in front of the tree. And so they pick up this being standing beside, there's two trees standing beside this tree. And then it pans around and then it comes back. And as the film ends, the being's there again, but it's moved to the next tree. And then you can see the light because the sun is over there. The light is coming, but the shadow casts a shadow on the trees behind it. But the shadow is about 5 times the size of the being, which means the light is coming from down below up onto this thing. And so we got that. And then I had done a lot of work on portals, and I think portals is partly true. I think if the government has any idea, they know that this is not physical like the way we think it is. It's got to do with this portal thing, this time and space thing. So one guy I've always followed around is Ron Pandolfi, and he's the guy. I don't know if you've seen the video. I grabbed off his wife's YouTube channel that he was very upset about, but I mean, it was something I couldn't resist.
If
And
it's been on your channel, I've probably seen it.
They're on a cruise ship, and she supposedly comes from another world. She's not human, and this is this whole idea she can open these portals and stuff like that. And so they're always talking about these portals and they're hinting, but he's always been seen as the big disinformation guy in the CIA that's throwing people off. And I've not interacted with him, the odd email back and forth, but really not interacted. I just sort of watch everything he does. I know everybody around him, and I listen to everything that they've said about him. So they're on this cruise going through the Panama Canal, and his wife Aaliyah says to him, she's just sitting there. There's lots of noise just in their restaurant there, and it's just so footman. She's the princess, so she's the princess. He's her footman. So she says, so footman, what do you say? And then Ron is looking into the camera, and he has no idea this is going to go public. He goes, people have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. The next time John, and he looks over at this guy sitting beside him, his name is John Sillison. John went to university in California with him. John sitting there cleaning his glasses. He's looking. He's cleaning his glasses. Next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here will go into the next world and come back again. And I go, thank you, Jesus. I grabbed that and I put it out. And he was really mad. He said, Cameron stole that. And it's like, well, why would I steal? I mean,
yeah, that's pretty juicy.
High level guy. He's 1983. He's been with intelligence since 1983. And the rumor story is he's the guy who briefs the president. So when you get him saying, people have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. The next time John goes to the desert, and there's a story that they have this portal thing going on in the desert, and I'm not sure where they're referring to in the desert. A number of us here will go into the next world and come back again.
That's
and
amazing.
The daughter, this little 6-year-old daughter, has been described as being on the other side. And you get a 6-year-old kid talking about that. Or when they got Joe Firmage, they had an interview with Joe Firmage, who is doing an invention, anti-gravity invention thing. And they were interviewing him. And then they said, hey, Kashmir, have you got a question for Joe Firmage? He says, yeah. She goes on, this is like a 6-year-old kid. She goes, how many portals have you got in your house? And I'm going, holy shit. She didn't make that up. She got that from her parents. Like, it's just, wow. So the portal thing, I think, is true.
Yeah, no, I don't mean to interrupt you, Grant, but I study near-death experiences. That's really kind of how I got into spirituality, and how I was able to eventually believe it and ultimately have my own experiences, I think. My consciousness was able to handle it. But, there are many people who have died and been to the other side and come back. But the idea that there could be a portal that you use to go to the other side is amazing. Now, is that what you're talking about when you say the next world?
Well, I didn't say it. Ron said it. I don't know what he meant by that. I mean, this is the idea that you change into an animal when you get to the other side. And the other thing was that you have to be let in. You can't just go through the portal. The other side controls the portal. That was one of the things I learned. So I'm picking up little bits and pieces from what people have said about this, trying to interpret this. And so what happened when these 9 people were levitated? Oh, the thing they said was, oh, and when we were oming, it sounded like we were underwater. And I said, they're in a portal. I didn't say to them, I knew they were in a portal, because that's what people describe. When you're in a portal, your balance is off. You feel kind of sick to your stomach. Your balance is off, and you're sort of standing sideways. And when you talk, it sounds like you're underwater. So when they said we were oming and sounded like we were underwater, I go, they're in a portal. They're describing being levitated. So I went to Ron Pandolfi, a guy that was sort of helping him. He claimed to be Mossad intelligence or whatever. And His name is Kevin Albert. And so I said, they're actually going to send someone to Mount Shasta. Kevin Albert was going to come with me because we're talking about this portal thing. And I knew the CIA and Ron and all those people were into the portal thing. So they wanted to send, and he never did come. But he talked about portals, and he said he'd seen a portal. He described the portal that he had seen in Northern California and stuff like that. And so when this incident occurred, they were always trying to get me to do something in Hollywood, do a host a documentary or something. I said, I don't go on front of camera. I'll help you. I'll give you all the whatever I've got, information for nothing. I don't care. I'm not going to be the guy sitting in front of the camera. I don't want to do that. And so I went to Kevin Albert. I said, hey, Kevin, got another incident of a portal. And I described this thing with the 9 people levitated in the air. And I said, isn't it time you told me what the CIA knows about portals? He said, okay, I'll make you a deal. He says, you get these people. We have a TV show. You do the thing. You tell their whole story, and then I'll add what the CIA knows about portals. And then, of course, my friend Katerina had actually worked for Ron because they were big into animals, and she would clean out the barns and help them. They got all sorts of animals and stuff like that. So she knew Ron. And then she went to these Latino people and says, Grant's going to bring the CIA in. And then that was it. End of the story. They're all gone. They just disappeared. Nobody's going to talk because Grant's going to bring in the CIA. So anyway, that's, but I did have my 15 seconds of fame was I actually got to talk to Tim Taylor, who's the guy in American Cosmic. And I saw him in 2013. There was no secret about who he was.
Tim Taylor, wow, you got to talk to the famous Tyler D.
Yeah, and I didn't know who he was. I had no idea who he was. My friend invited him there, and he actually introduced me to an experiencer, and that was the whole thing where I tell people you've got to watch the experiencers. And he's the guy that watched Chris Bledsoe, and he watched this other girl who I've not really made public yet. She's done an interview for me, and she lives now. She used to live here in Manitoba. She now lives in Florida, and he said, I know somebody who's an experiencer who used to live near you. And I said, oh, where? He said, Steinbach. I said, that's like 30 miles from my city. I said, oh, cool. He said, you want to talk to her? I said, yeah, sure. So Tim gets his phone. I go on Tim's phone, and there's Connie, and I say, hey, Connie. And I've been friends with her, and she's got just a wild story, just incredibly story. And she had premonitions. And what he had is he had her with a book, and she was writing out all the premonitions she was getting, all the things that happened to her. And that's what you do. You get experiencers. And that's what Ron had said, because, and I haven't got confirmed that he said it, but there was this thing, and I asked Dan Smith, his friend, I said, did Ron say this? And he said, maybe, which means, yeah, he said it. It said, because we cannot control the phenomena, we watch those that the phenomena affects. Lights in the sky produce very limited information. And this is the whole idea. So Tim Taylor is watching this girl. And the other thing, so Tim Taylor, and if you listen to people describing encounters to him, he always does the same thing. He really doesn't tell you anything, but he asks you questions. So he gets his cell phone. And again, I have no idea who this guy is. No idea. And he says, hey, so look at this. He shows me this photograph of this painting. I don't know if you've seen this. I posted it a few times. And these two guys are flying through space. And there's no artist name on it or anything like that. The one guy looks like he's old, and they look like they're in pajamas. It's kind of a weird looking thing. And he says, what do you think of this? I go, I don't know. And then he flips the next picture, and it's a painting of these balls all going down this tunnel. And they're getting smaller as they go down this tunnel. He says, what do you think of this? I don't know, Tim. I have no idea. And then he shows me this 3 paintings of this eclipse as the eclipse paintings is taking place. He says, what do you think of this? I don't know, Tim. I have no idea. And then he shows me a picture of outside a building. There's these screens with all this outer space stuff, like colored outer space galaxies and stuff. What do you think of this? Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. And then he shows me this car. It's on a parkade, and it's like a 56 or 57 Chev, and it's sitting on top of this parkade. And then you can see there's something in the back seat. He says, see that? It's a postcard in the back seat. I said, yeah. He said, you know what it says? He says, no. He says, it's something about, it was a guy writing to his girlfriend or vice versa. I wish I could travel through time and space to be with you. Something like that. I go, that's what it says? He says, yeah. And he says, well, what do you think? I said, I have no idea, Tim. He said, you know where it is? You know where this is? I said, no, I have no idea where it is. He said, this is Hughes Aircraft building outside of LAX. I said, I still don't know what, still have no idea. I still don't know what you're talking about. And then he says, you know, and this is the people ask me about this. I'm not sure whether he said, do you know what this is, or do you know what this is rumored to be, or what this was? I can't remember what it was, but it was, do you know something like, do you know where this is? And I said, no. He said, that's where the jump room was. And I went, what? Can I see that again? And then he says, you know, this one, he shows the one with the two guys flying through space. He says, do you know where that one was? And I go, where? He says, right outside the elevator. And I go, really? And so, and then I'm thinking, next time I go to LAX, I'm going there. And that's the first thing. I got to LAX, and I got on
Hell
the bus
yeah.
and I went over. It's 999 Sepulveda Avenue. There's two buildings. I actually contacted the guy with the jump room guy that went supposedly with Obama. I contacted him. I said, hey, were you in the front building or the back building? Because this is in the front building. I said, were you in the front building or the back building when you were a kid doing this jump room thing? And he said, I don't remember. I was a young kid. I don't know if it was the front, back, because it turned into an office building now. It's an office building. And so then it wasn't until a couple of years later you sort of catch on. And then I'm thinking about the story, and I'm telling people the story, and all of a sudden it goes, why did Tim have those photographs? Why has he got those photographs on his phone? Why did he go to the building? If this is all BS, what's Tim Taylor doing at 999 Sepulveda Avenue in Los Angeles at this place where the jump room supposedly was? And this thing with the postcard and stuff like that. And I'm going, wow. So that's that was pretty significant. So
So,
again, it's like
for those people that don't know what the jump room story, can you just briefly tell us what the jump room is?
well, this is a story that they had developed jump room technology that they could put people from one place to another, and that they were moving people from Mars from here to Mars. They were going from wherever it was into New Mexico. I think they would end up in Las Cruces, New Mexico, or something. And this guy's father worked for this aerospace company on the East Coast, and they would transport these kids back and forth. And that they were going, and that Barack Obama was supposedly one of the kids, and that Barack Obama had been in his program, the CIA program, and that he'd been transported to Mars. So when this guy came out, Andrew Basiago came out with the story. Everybody said, he's making the story up. It's all garbage. And I sort of thought the same thing. I had lunch with him one time. I think he was one of the smartest guys I ever met in my life. I was really impressed because I thought he was a total nutcase. And then when I had lunch, I was like, he's a pretty smart guy. And so that was the thing. Everybody believed it was like a total garbage story. But the question you have to answer then is, so why was Tim Taylor there? Like, why has he
Yeah,
got
Tim
these
Taylor's a
photographs?
solid guy.
And why are these paintings there? Because they don't have anything on the painting. And he said, oh, you got to watch out for the guard. When you go there to photograph, make sure you watch out for this guard. So I go there at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and luckily the guard was letting people in the door. He was working doorman stuff. So I'm sitting with my camera. So I photographed all this stuff, and I posted a few times these paintings at 999
Did
Sepulveda
Tim
Avenue.
go through the door?
Well, no, he didn't. I didn't know. I didn't know till
He
years
jumped?
later. No, that's the thing. Tim doesn't tell you anything. He always says the same thing. What do you think of this? And I've heard other people that he's talked to, like Chris Bledsoe. What do you think of this? And he doesn't tell you anything. He just asks, he questions you. It's almost like the phenomena is doing that. They question you, like, he makes you think and makes you figure it out. He didn't say anything. That's why I can't remember whether he said, this is where the jump room was, or this is where it's supposed to be. And I don't know what that was. It was just that I knew that he had said this was the building, that it was
Do you
supposed to have
think
been.
do you think that Tim has been to Mars or off world?
Well, I think he's taken the point is he's taking the story seriously. He wouldn't have gone to the building unless and he's the inside guy. I mean, he's the main guy. That's Black World, UFO. If anybody knows anything, he knows what's going on.
Yeah.
He may not know everything, but he knows a little bit about what's going on. And the fact that he was in that building and taking photographs of that building means there must be something to the story. If it was just a total garbage story, he wouldn't have been there. And it wasn't until years later I'm thinking, what the heck? Why was he in that building? Like, and then it really became significant that he was in that building, and that it indicated that maybe there's some truth to this story. And that's what I say. What I've discovered is I've done a lot of work on the UFO thing, and every time I go anti-gravity, it ends up at a dead road, and nuts and bolts. Every time I go portals, there's always something where I go, it's gonna be real. Like the Ron thing, the thing where they recover the actuators. I won't go through all the stories, but the one where this Silicon, Ron's wife is asking him, "Hey, this actuator that you got, is it ours, or is it no? Is it theirs, or is it ours?" And before she said ours, he said yes, and it's theirs. It's not ours. That he pulls these actuators. He goes to these portals, one in Puerto Rico, one's off the coast of Georgia, and these stories. And we hear these stories. John Stolzen gets this actuator, and that they got this thing in the desert. And then one time I asked Dan Smith, he was talking about he's always lipping off and stuff, but he's played as the crazy guy. Ron says he's a crazy guy. Grant believes everything he says, and at one point he says, I said to him, "Hey Dan, you had 3 chances to go into the portal in the desert. You turned it all down. You chickened out every time." He said, "No, I don't think that's true." And then Aaliyah, Ron's wife, says, "Yeah, that is true." Oh shit, there's a portal.
Called
And it's
out.
like, what? So it's just these little bits, and I pick it up, and I even asked one of Ron's closest friends. I says, "I'm tired of this. I just, I don't know. It's interesting story. The portal story is interesting." I said, I just, because there's all these games, there's intelligence games and rhymes and riddles and bird codes, and they just like to play these stupid games. Like, I'm tired of this. I I said, "Hey, should I pull out, or do you think it's worth sticking around?" Because he knows them really well. Says, "Would you think I should stick around?" There's a long pause, and he goes, "Yeah, I should probably stick around." I go, "Oh, really? Okay." So then nothing happens for like 2, 3 years. And then we're talking because we're into sports and we're into hockey and stuff. So I'm talking to him about something else. And he said, "Hey, remember that I asked him that question a couple of years ago?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "It's real." I said, "Thank you." Because I can't really use it because I mean, he's getting this sort of in confidence what he knows. He doesn't want to turn his friends in. And he said, "It's real." I go, "That's like real." So that's what I can tell you. I think, and that's why I think it's going to be more a thing where when you start looking at beings, they're translucent, they can go through walls, and it starts to look like out of body experience. It starts to look like they can move you into a state. For example, I say to people, why do they come into your room and say, "Hey, Jack, wake up, wake up, wake up," and then you wake up and you go, "Oh my God, an evil alien!" You're looking, you just freak out. They're getting you to dissociate. Like, why do they need to wake you up and then go back to sleep, and then go back to sleep, and suddenly you're on board the ship? They're getting you to dissociate. They're shutting the left brain down. That's why they wake you up in the middle of the night. It doesn't make any sense. So when I look at aliens, I see there's just so many things that don't make any sense. They don't have any muscle tissue. David Jacobs, when they do the mind scan thing where they look into the person's eyes, they get really close and they look in the person's eyes and they can read their mind and stuff like that. The grays, they get really close, and then he always asks them, "Is he breathing?" And he says, they all say, "No, he's not breathing." So if he's not breathing, and he doesn't eat, he doesn't drink, he doesn't sleep, doesn't have eyelids, doesn't have a belly button, doesn't have sex organs. Is this really a biological entity, or is it something else? And that's the whole thing. When I hear Jim Semivan say, "Oh, there was this thing and it had this guardian type thing going on about it," I'm going, "Oh, that's what it is." It's sort of like it's a game. We're in the space age, so the guardian angels are playing space guys now, and this is all the thing of lessons that we go through these lessons, and we plan it. It's not like there's some evil alien coming here. We planned to come into this world to do whatever we're going to do. There's nothing really random going on. We're the ones that dealt the cards, and we're playing the cards. We go through the river of forgetfulness, because if you don't go through the river of forgetfulness, what's the point to come? I mean, it's all about learning. It's about forgetting and learning the lessons that you don't know the answers to stuff. So I'm more and more all the time into this idea that if I were to guess, I'm going to say this is going to be spiritual, because it's all spiritual. If you take a look at the Newton thing, we come into the world, we are spirits inhabiting physical bodies. We create the physical bodies. It's all consciousness, as Erwin Schrodinger says, nothing gets beyond consciousness. Consciousness is primary. So consciousness creates matter, not the other way around. So if we come in
Well,
here,
even David Grush is talking about the spiritual.
yeah, and that's the thing. We got the number one question we got to answer is, who remember who you actually are. What is really going on here? It's not about aliens. What's going on? Why are we in the world? Why is there a world? Why are we doing in the world? How do we get in here, and where are we going? And if you look at it through the Michael Newton thing, it's this thing that we come in to learn lessons, and we go back out and we go through the council, and the guy stands behind us, and we go through and we learn more stuff. And it's a circle where we put information into the circle, and the universe gets more and more grand and more elaborate and more complex. And it's just a loop that we're feeding this whole thing. And so it's all going to be spiritual. It's all part of this thing that we came in. And that's where you get into near-death experiences aren't random. We planned this. We planned the abduction thing. You'll hear a lot of experiencers say, "Oh, that's my family. This is my family here. That's my family." They have this association that I used to be an alien. That's my family. And it's those kind of leak through things of coming, that this is all planned, that we come in, we plan this thing. We're not victims. We agree to this whole thing. And you can ask people, contract. I'll say to people, hey, you think you got a contract? And they go, yeah, I think so. I don't know what it is, but or they'll say, yeah, I got a contract, and they'll start telling you their mission in life and where they're going and whatever. And that's where you start to understand that it's much more complex than aliens that got lost. Because that's what Tim Taylor said. He said, and I go on the metal thing with the apports. I mean, it defies logic that people believe this kind of stuff, where they go, oh, the aliens are crashing and they're these pieces are falling off, and it's like, come on, they come out like 1,000 light years. If you believe they're coming extraterrestrial, 1,000 light years, and then little pieces start to fall off the craft, come on, give your head a shake. They're dropping this stuff on purpose because no two pieces are the same. It's the same as the craft. No two people touch the same thing. Jim Lukatsky says no two UFO sightings are the same. I maintain there's no two alien sightings the same. If you take Betty Hill's gray, put it against Whitley Strieber's gray, put it against Betty Andreasen's gray, they're not even close looking. The thing is this impression, but they're not the same. And that's the whole thing. So we're playing this it's all sort of a spiritual game. It's going to be a lot less physical. It's not going to have any capitalism to it. People say, they're here to steal the gold or whatever. They don't wear jewelry. They don't have leather furniture. They don't have chandeliers. They live like me. They look like
they're not wearing any bling, are they?
Yeah, they're not wearing any clothes. They've got nothing physical about them at all. And then you start wondering, like, what's actually going on? And that's what Tim Taylor said. When they come across, they're crashing on purpose. This is gifting. So they call it the gifting field. It was my friend that took Tim Taylor to the gifting field. And that's what he turned into a Roman Catholic. He converted. And this is the guy that's got more information than anybody. He said he became a Roman Catholic. And then Diane Pasolka said when they go to this field, where the gifting field in New Mexico, where they're blindfolded, she said it's got a fence. And then she said they got altars all over the place. And they build an altar every time they go there and they pray. And then you start realizing that Tim Taylor knows a few things that you and I don't know out on the street. And I say it's all going to be spiritual because that's what it's all about. It's us coming into this world. What's really going on? This alien thing has only been going on for a few years. And if you go back to 1895, people say, oh, it's extraterrestrial. I'll say, if it's extraterrestrial, do you seriously believe that in 1896 that aliens were flying around in wooden ships and they had beards and they're hanging off of ropes and they were doing rhymes and riddles and stuff like that, and that they flew from Mars? We believe they're from Mars, that those wooden ships flew through the vacuum of space from Mars. Come on, give your head a shake. It's changing. It's morphing as we're going along. It's changing from one thing to another, and it's all about this lesson type thing, and it's getting more complex, and we're moving along, but the phenomena is moving along as well. And to me, it's all just it's all a sort of a game of almost like Michael Newton says, we plan. We're going to do this, and I even go back to we have these things where you and I, before we were born, we had a meeting. And you said, "Oh, I'm going to do this podcast, and I'm going to be a researcher, and we're going to come on my podcast, and we're going to do this." And the three-wave idea, that these waves that come in to do stuff in the world, that we've all made agreements, that we're all connected together, and we're trying to move this issue, and other people have their own issues, and our issue is the Super Bowl story, the biggest story of all times. The fact that the consciousness is primary and all this kind of stuff, that we are the people that have been brought in. And so it's time to quit whining and complaining about things that aren't going right and we haven't got the answers. And why can't the government just tell us, and realize that we're here, that this is part of our deal, and that we got to play in the Super Bowl? If you realize what's going on, this is the biggest story of all times. And we not only got you got your $10,000 ticket, and people say, look, I was at the Super Bowl. Look at my tag. I was in the Super Bowl. And that you don't get the answers before going to the Super Bowl. If you get the answers to what's going on before you go to the Super Bowl, you're not going to sell any tickets. You're only going to get the tickets sold when nobody knows what's going to happen in the Super Bowl. And we're in the Super Bowl, and you may be the water boy, the quarterback, whatever, but we got to play in the Super Bowl, and we should be thanking God every day that we got the game. And that to me is
I'm definitely the water boy, but I like that. We're in the Super Bowl, Grant. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, I don't know how much time you have. Do you have time for a couple more questions or a few more questions?
A couple. Go a couple more, and we'll.
Okay. I'll try to keep it short, and if you can keep your answers short so that we can get through a few of them. Okay. You said something that I had never heard before, and maybe I heard you wrong, but did you say that Travis Walton that he was taken during the time when the Malmstrom incident happened?
Malmstrom and Loring Air Force Base. What happened is, if you see the 1975 documents, the Colm Kelleher always refers to them, the Northern Base Tiers. So there's UFOs inside Loring Air Force Base where they have the nuclear weapons for the bombers, the B-52 bombers. Malmstrom or Wordsworth Air Force Base in northern Michigan, Minot Air Force Base, where I had an incident at a missile base there, and then Malmstrom. So that's when Linda Howe got involved with Malmstrom, 1975. Same time, her brother was a helicopter pilot and said, "Hey, Linda, guess what? There's UFOs over them," and that's how she got dragged in. That's how I got dragged in. The missiles were being interfered with in North Dakota. And then when Travis was taken, and that's why I say it's the theory of wow. It's like because then there was really no abductions. There was Betty and Barney Hill. There was the Schumer case in '67, a police officer, and there was the Pascagoula '73. But other than that, there was no abduction cases. And he was taken right in the middle of all those incidents, but at Loring and stuff like that, at the beginning of November. And every night he was gone. There was, I think, most of them were at Malmstrom, but every single night there was one at Loring, and I think the rest were at Malmstrom. But every night he was gone, there was a UFO over a nuclear missile silo. And that's the whole theory of wow, is why would they take Travis Walton for 5 days? And it's like what, did the Gray get sick, or like what, they were on strike or whatever? It's like, no, let's do something really weird. Let's take someone for 5 days. That's all right.
So
And that's
so
why I say
so it,
about,
so it's theoretically possible that he was in one of the UFOs shutting down the nukes.
yeah, or you take the one, and then they got mad at me. Susie Hansen got mad at me about this one. Is if you take it, the whole thing with Malmstrom, when Salas is in the silo, and Salas is an experiencer, and I said, hey, that's like they got their own guy, they got their own spies inside, their own
Right.
guys inside the
Right.
silo. I said, I'm laughing, and she's that's not funny. She wanted me to apologize to Salas. I said that is just bizarre. It's their guy is in the silo and is
It
going to
is a
die.
little creepy. It is a little suspicious there. It really is. It
Yeah,
really is.
that's the whole thing. You start realizing there's these connections that may not be coincidence, that this
Right.
stuff's going on. That so yeah, there was these incidents, and then there was the one that they took me to in 88 happened in North Dakota. I was actually at the silo where these 3 young girls, 9-year-old girls, saw this thing come out of the silo, and I remember saying to her, I said, "So, where did it actually come out?" And she said, "That metal thing there, that metal thing." I said, "It came out of the metal thing?" She said, "I came right through the metal thing." And it was a round object, and it was spinning, and it was copper, and it looked like burns on the side and stuff like that. She wet her pants, and they all just sort of freaked out. And then she one of the other 3 girls, like a couple, I don't know, it was a month later or 2 months later, she said to the other girl, she said, "Your father's going to die of a heart attack." She suddenly became psychic. Your father's going to die of a heart attack. And that day or the next day, her father died of a heart attack. And the woman didn't talk to her for like 20 years, 30 years or whatever. She's
It
furious.
wasn't her fault.
And that's the thing. So that yeah, Travis, you start seeing these connections where it's like the medals, like where when I saw Gary Nolan with the medals, where he's got the Uba Tuba piece, and he's from the same crash, the 2 pieces from the same crash, and the one has the isotopes all messed up, and the other one, the isotopes are completely normal. And I'm going, that is just great. I can just see the intelligence going, like, you see the look on his face when he saw that? Holy cow. And that's what they're doing. They're just doing these weird things where everybody's going, what is going on? These isotopes are all messed up, and it's the same sample. And that's the idea where Tim Taylor says they're gifting this stuff. All the pieces are different. There's no 2 pieces the same, and you're not going to get a solution. It's not everybody thinks, oh, I got this piece, I'm going to build a flying saucer. No, they just want you to go, where are these pieces coming from? Like this what's going on? And how do you layer 83 pieces where they don't bind together? And they're just getting you curious. They're driving you along this route with these little breadcrumbs. That's what they're doing.
Okay. Okay. Another question. And stop me whenever you run out of time. But yeah, you mentioned earlier about I'm probably going to get the name of the race wrong. The Chom, these beings that were being channeled.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Chon. Well, they called themselves the beings, but Chon was they wanted to refer because it was the 4 basic elements that make up life: is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So Chon was the name, but they didn't want to be called anything. That was they were saying, like, we're not beings. We're this is not what it's about, and that's the idea was. So just call us beings. Just call us Chon. And they didn't have any faces. They didn't have any noses. They didn't have anything, and only the one woman could see them, and they were little tiny black things that were like a foot high or whatever. And we got some drawings of them, but yeah, they
And were they 3D? Were they higher dimensional? Where did they exist?
well, that's what they told me. We've always been here. You're the visitor, and that goes to this idea: if there's no time and space, how big is the universe? It's a singularity in space. There is no time and space. If there's no time and space, they're not coming from out there. It's like they're that's their idea was we've always been here. And that's, we're starting to get that idea. So people say they're hiding in the oceans, they're hiding whatever, that we're here, that maybe they've always, people, John, Valet and people are saying, they've always been here. We just didn't pick them up until now. And that's the whole idea. Yeah, we're all here. Everything's here. It's all, they're not coming from anywhere.
You mean Earth?
Singularity. There's no Earth. They even said there's no Earth. There's nothing. It's all a singularity. It's all, or John Wheeler. So John Wheeler was the intellectual successor to Einstein at Princeton Advanced Studies. And he said, I can 100% believe that the entire universe is a figment of the imagination. That's the whole idea. It's just a thought. The whole universe is a thought. There is no material world. Consciousness is created by matter is created by consciousness. It's all this thing, and it's this vibration, and it appears like it's, the table is like Jacques Vallée. I remember Paula Harris was there, and she's doing this whole thing, and Jacques Vallée was banging on the table and saying, Paula, this is not solid. And it's this whole idea is you're making these perceptions. If they're out here, there's time, there's space. And even the dual slit experiment, or the spooky action at a distance, if you can take a particle and change the spin of a particle a billion light years away, and it's instantaneous, there's something wrong with our idea about time and space. And that's what Ron Johnson's thing was. In 1 second, he was like 70 or 80,000 light years away in 1 second. There's something wrong with our time and space.
Yeah.
And the idea that I'm saying is, it's the whole idea is, and I've got a whole number of them. Rumi, Jesus said, the kingdom of God, you say, is it here? Is it? It's not here. It's not there. The kingdom of God is within you. It's the whole idea. It's all within you. When you remote view, you go within yourself. When you do out of body experience, you're going within yourself. You got Bullman, who was the top trainer for OBE. You got to go within to go without. The people on board the ship are told, go within yourself, imagine it in your head, and then we will go there. It's this idea that it's all a thought. It's all inside our head. That's why we're not even close to what they told me. You think you understand what's going on when I was doing the psilocybin. You think you haven't got a clue. I would absolutely believe that. It is so far beyond anything that we can actually imagine. That we're making these assumptions based upon perception. They look like they're coming from out there. So we take that and we don't let go of it. It looks like there's time and there's space. It looks like things are solid. It looks like the world isn't rotating. And wrong, wrong, wrong. Every time it's a perception, it's wrong. And that's why you got to listen to the experiencers, because I did a lot of work on autistic savants, which is extremely important. And the one I always point out is the guy's name is George Finn. So George Finn is this guy who's very highly autistic. And he's sitting in a room, and 60 Minutes is interviewing him back in 1983. And they say, hey, George, what day is, day after, day one of or July the 11th of the year one? And he goes, yeah, it would be a Tuesday. And then they ask him this and all these things, and he's nailing them wrong. And they would even ask him questions like, then the next, when are the next 10 years that Easter is going to fall on April the 1st? And you go, this year, and he'd name it off. And then he'd say, hey, George, let me ask you a question. What's 2 times 3? And he goes, would that be 7? And they said, what's 5 times 7? Would that be 50? And he goes, how do you get that, George? How do you know all this stuff? All these dates and stuff like that. How do you know that? He said, it's pretty good, eh? Pretty good, I can do that. He has no idea. And that's the whole thing. There's a field. He's pulling it out of a field. He is not calculating. He's pulling it out of a field. And you can see this with savants or people that get channeled. That's why I'm so interested in people who are channeling. If I can determine that they're channeling, I can watch that there's no edits in their stuff, that they're speaking pure without the ums and the ahs, then they're channeling. And that's the whole thing. These people are in the field, and you got to go to these people because they're in the field and they can pull it. In fact, there's one woman who channels, and she's been doing it. I've got her book, and I've told her to publish it, and she deals with the entities. She calls them the entities. So I actually asked her the other day, because I'm doing this book on time and space, and the crossovers and all these different paranormal stuff. And I said, hey, ask the entities, what about time and space? Get them to talk about. And that's the whole deal, is you're trying to find people who have been in the field, who have ripped the filter and are trans-channeling, or have been on board the ship and are getting messages from the aliens. And that's better than the left brain, because the left brain is just going to make up a bunch of shit that they do. If you go back to there's actually been proved that if you go back to the split brain, I'm going to get into this thing, but split brain, they would split the brain with the corpus callosum to stop the epilepsy, and they would give these people experiments. So they'd tell the right brain something, and then it would answer. But the left brain, when they're talking to the left brain, they would put a signal in, and then they would show the right brain something, but the left brain couldn't see it. And then they'd say to the right brain, they say, get up and walk around, or drink a Coke. And then the person would, of course, drink a Coke, and then they'd say to the left brain, because that's where your verbal center is, and the right brain can't talk, the female side can't talk. So they'd say to the left brain, say, hey, so why'd you get up and walk around? Every single time it would make up a story, and every single time it was wrong. And that's what's happening in the left brain. It's called the interpreter. So they don't want to call it like the baloney machine or the perpetual liar or whatever. So they call it the interpreter. It's doing the best it can to interpret, but it's always wrong. And that's what's called analytical overlay in remote viewing. Hal Puthoff's wife discovered that. Is you get everything right. You get the smell, the taste, the shape, the size, everything right. But as soon as you tried to name it, they'd say, what is it? They'd say it's a water plant when it was a swimming pool. And that was where she got this thing about analytical overlay. So what they were doing in the remote viewing is they said, just tell us what you feel, what you sense, what you taste, but don't try to figure out what it is. Because that's the left brain saying, if I say to you, okay, we got a target in Egypt, the left brain goes, I know what it is. It's a king's chamber. And it starts to guess. And it's always wrong. The left brain wants to get in the ego, or the left brain wants to interpret. And that's this whole principle is if you can get somebody who the left brain is shut down, whether it's channeling or whatever the technique is, they can go in the field like that savant, and you can ask them a question, and the savants are never wrong. So you can ask them all those date questions or mathematical questions where they're multiplying 2 10-digit numbers together and stuff like that, and they come up with the answer just like that. They're not 2 out of 3 right. They're right every single time. That means the information is in the field, and you can get the information out of the field.
That's amazing. I would love to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think we all can. I mean, you just got to go through the front windshield of a car, or have a near-death experience, or be savant. Because the savants there's piles. I went to Gaia wanted me to do a TV series, and I said, well, let's do savants. These guys are the most amazing stories in the world. I mean, guys who never played music or whatever, and they have a head injury, and suddenly they got 8,000 songs, and they can play it in any key or any rhythm or whatever, and just change. And somebody has to button their shirt. They can't button their own shirt, or they can't take care of themselves, and yet they can play, music and stuff like that. I said that was the most amazing thing, but they didn't want to do it because they didn't have a travel budget. And I said, well, I don't want to just sit in the studio. I mean, these guys are fascinating. The stuff the savants can do, it shows you the power of the human mind, and that we're just on the very sort of limited edge, and we're allowing the ego to run the show. We think we understand what's going on, and we're guessing. We're just making perceptions, and perceptions are always wrong, and skeptics are always wrong. That's why I'll point out skeptics. I don't care. You can go back in history and you can look, and a skeptic has never been right, ever. They're always wrong, because that's the left brain always talking. It's like, no. It's I don't need to read a book. I don't need to know. I know about everything. You ask me, I know more about UFOs than the generals, and it's that ego mind that comes in and will give you an answer to everything, but the answers are always wrong. You've got to find that field of akashic field, or where this Cook's wife said, I knew the answer to everything, and I wasn't allowed to bring it back. And that's the river of forgetfulness. You're not allowed to bring it back. You're just allowed to remember, as I did, that you had the answer. I thought it was, all I could remember was, it seemed very mechanical. It was sort of like, and there didn't seem to be the unconditional love. And it's like, I remember that bit, but it was so weird, where it was sort of like, I'd always wondered about that and studied it. And suddenly I had that experience myself of knowing everything, where you just sort of understand, oh, that's how it works. And that's the whole idea, is if you've had a download, if you've had how many downloads, that what people will describe, the thing I say is the most powerful thing that I described from my experience in 2012 about consciousness, was the fact that it came with absolute certainty. And that is the going back through the river of forgetfulness, where it's like, who's your first girlfriend? And then I say, are you sure? And you go, I know who it was. I know. It's that certainty. It's like somebody reminds you, like, what was the name of that person? And then somebody says, oh yeah, that's who it was. And they tell you that it was. It's like they show you again. You knew it already before you came in the world. You had absolute knowledge. You knew it. You went through the river of forgetfulness. And then when you have the download experience, you see it again and you go, oh yeah, it comes with absolute certainty, because I've seen it before. I know that. I've seen it. And that's absolute certainty is something that, unless you've had the experience, you cannot describe to a person. It comes with absolute certainty. I don't care what you say. I know this is the answer. This is how it works.
I love it, Grant. I love it. I guess we'll call it a day for now, but I would love to have you back sometime.
Sure.
I have so many more questions for you. You've raised so many things that I wanted to follow up on, but I feel like no, we don't have time to do that today
Yeah.
because each answer will probably take a while.
No,
And
no,
I love it. I love it. But thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any projects that you're currently working on that people should know about? I know you're writing a new book. Do you have anything that you would like to talk about to people?
well, not really. I have two books on what I wrote a book called Ma Managing Magic, which is the idea that I've always talked about disclosure. I've written four books on disclosure, and I've always said the government is disclosing this thing. People say no, no. Now they're starting to agree with me, and I call it managing magic. So it's not managing UFOs; it's managing magic. They knew. That's what Ron Pandolfi said in 1991 when he first came on the scene. He said to Dan Smith, he said, "We have a phenomenology problem." Not a UFO problem, a phenomenology problem. It's all phenomenology. It's all the same thing. And so I wrote the book Beyond, and that I in that one I actually sort of spelled out 2017. That was 2017. I spelled out that there was going to be disclosure. They were going to drop this thing. That's exactly what happened. And so I wrote Beyond Managing Magic, um, a compendium of rumors, because that's what John Alexander called my first book, a compendium of rumors. And yeah, it is a compendium of rumors. But now John is admitting, yeah, it was some of those rumors are real. That he's now
Nice.
confessed. And then the other one, it was I was working on it as the other one's called Beyond Managing Magic, Landing the Plane, because I had an experience where it came to me with absolute certainty. Is they said, quit getting so wound up about this and concerned or whatever. We know how to land the plane. And that's the whole idea. The phenomena, as Jim Semivan said, they're running the show. They know what they're doing. And they know how to land the plane. They're moving us along, and they're in control of this thing. They're running it. And quit getting so upset. We know how to land the plane. And then the crossover book, which I think is definitely they want me to write it. They're pushing really hard to get this book out. And I it's one of these books I can write in. I'd say if you were to time it down, it's 2 weeks. I can just write
Man, you're
constantly.
fast. I need to get you to write my
Well,
books. I'm a
well,
novelist. Go. I need your help.
but it comes just like this idea comes to my head. This idea, like the way I talk, it's like I'll tell a story and then I tell another story. They're just putting the stories. Tell the story, now tell a story, now tell a story. So I'm working on the crossover book, which I think is a very important book if people want to understand what's going on, because I go through everything. I go through ghosts, I go through orbs and all this kind of stuff, and I tie it all together because I've studied all that sort of stuff, and I realized that there's these very key crossovers. And then, as I said at the start, the one thing people should do is they should go to my Facebook site. Twitter is not so much, because Twitter is more people who are into disclosure and they're very skeptical and they just sit on their rear ends and argue with each other. Facebook, I have this thing with the light language, which is really interesting. We may even have a panel with Mary Rodwell, who's worked on this as well, bringing these people who do the language, and Chris Bledsoe. And if you go to my Facebook site, I show the writing that Chris Bledsoe saw on the panel board inside the craft.
Neat.
He's never released that, so I've got that on
Yeah.
my Facebook.
Yeah.
And it's all this thing. These people who have these where they sit there and the woman's got the camera and she's talking and her hand is just writing away and she's talking away and the hand is writing all this and they don't know what it is, but it's really really bizarre stuff. And there's a lot of people who are very interested in talking about it. And then people start coming. I'm doing it too. And then I said, hey, would you go on a panel? And so if you go to my Facebooks right now, you'll see this very interesting discussion. And I
What's your Facebook page called?
presidential UFO.
Okay.
So
And your YouTube page is White House UFO.
White House UFO. Although the YouTube, I don't do YouTubes, and I don't have anybody put it up for me anymore. So I don't put up the YouTube anymore. I do have a paranormal consciousness podcast, but again, I actually need some help to do stuff because basically I'm writing. That's my main priority is I write. So I haven't done a podcast in a while. I even have the one where Tom DeLong. I have a podcast I wanted to do for weeks, and that is the podcast where Tom DeLong describes how the crafts were given to the contractors. And he goes to the whole thing. 2016 interview with George Knapp. I remember it, and I went to a guy who's an expert at finding it. He found it, and he describes exactly how it's done, how this eminent domain thing works, and how he was told the crafts work. And so podcasts like that I want to put out, but uh, there's a lot of back stuff. Like I do maybe 10 of people flying the craft on there. If you go to the back episodes of Paranormal UFO Consciousness podcast, where I do these people tell stories of how they fly the craft, and you listen to 1, 2, 3, and after a while you go, man, they're all telling the same story. And that's something that you're not going to make up. If you're gonna make up a story about being on a craft, you don't want to put in the craft, you don't want to put in the story that I saw in 360 degrees, which people say. That doesn't make any sense. Out of experienced people describe the same thing. And you're not going to say, I flew the craft. This one first woman that told me that she was in her 70s. I'm looking at her like, you're insane. Like, you think I'm stupid? You flew the craft. Yeah, sure you did. It's like, and that's the whole deal, is like, that's not something you got to put in. So those bizarre episodes that they're in there. And Chris Bledsoe tells 5-minute story of him flying the craft. And I have this first woman telling the story about flying 3 different crafts, and the crafts are, they can make them as big as they want on the inside. She said they have crafts that are as large as the solar system. And I thought
Wow,
she was
that's
nuts.
insane, Grant. Wow.
2013, but now I've got other people who are
Wow.
telling the same story, that they can. Susie Hansen said, they said, watch. In fact, I just put it on Facebook. She said, watch, and she's in a room, and she said the walls started to move away, and she said eventually the walls were so far you couldn't see the walls. They can make the craft as big as they want. It's all consciousness.
Yeah.
We've got to get out of this perception of physical reality, and they can change everything. And the one guy said, just put your hand up, and the book comes out of the wall. It just pops out of the wall, and they hold the book. And that's what it is. It's basic bottom line thing is going to be consciousness, and we aren't even there. We're still into being entertained by little UFO stories. And believe you're going to get the little thing out of the engine out of the craft, and that's when you hear James Lukatsky said the craft was it had no engine in it, and we have no idea how they fly the craft. And that was in the Wilson Leak document, which I pushed out onto the internet. The Wilson Leak document, you see at the very end of the Wilson Leak document, it says, we have a craft and we think it'll fly. And I went, wow, that story's true. They've got a craft and they cannot turn it on because you need consciousness. You need a consciousness interface, someone to touch it and turn the craft on. You can't turn it on. So they got a craft, they can't do anything with it.
They need to get Chris over there.
Chris, yeah, exactly. Well, they do that. Melinda Leslie, if you ever interview Melinda Leslie, ask her about that. She talked about the fact that they bring these experiencers on board the craft. She talks about the Millabs, where they bring them on and they give them pieces of the craft. And then she said, when she was there, said, can you make this work? And the thing started to work. And then the guy says, we got another one. That's what they do. They bring the experiencers and they find out, all right, have you ever experienced? Or the story with Chris Bledsoe, where you get this indication that some people like Tim Taylor know. If you've heard the story with Chris Bledsoe, where they take the 2 pieces of metal and he suddenly goes into convulsions or whatever, they know a little bit. And that was, something that shows this consciousness type thing where they understand a little bit, but they really don't have any control over it in terms of how it works. And they're learning the same as you and I. And we got to be humble and realize that it's the journey, it's not the destination. We live in the Western world, especially the United States, where we want everything we want yesterday. And that's why Walker said, you're just curious. Admit it, you're just curious. You've got 2 cars, you got a big house, your kids have been through college, and now you need some entertainment. So let's, used to, in the 18th century, 19th century, used to go to seances and talk to dead people. Now it's like, let's go for a skywatch and look for some aliens. It's just entertainment. That's all it is for most people. And that's why the government is not about to give it up in terms of they're using it for their stuff. And curiosity, as Bush supposedly told Jimmy Carter, curiosity is not sufficient need to know. They don't really care if you're curious. Go do something else. That's what Walker told us. You're never going to get the answer. Go do something else. You're wasting your time. You're up against the windmills.
Well, what I always say, or what I've been saying recently, is that UFO disclosure is spiritual disclosure because they're all connected.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
that's
that
that.
UFO disclosure is so important because of that. If we could get more in touch with spirituality and our higher selves or whatever, that could only help us as a race. And I think that's why it's so important. But
Let me make one more point, because
okay,
you
yeah.
hit an important point there that I always say. Spiritual people always talk about the fact that they want disclosure because the religious people are going to panic. I will absolutely guarantee it will not be the religious people. It's going to be the secular scientists who are going to be fighting over the cyanide pills.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
Because that's where the world's going down. I paid $50,000 a year to go to MIT, and it was all BS. Get out of here.
Right? I shake
Yeah.
my fist
Okay.
at you. All right. I love it. I love it, Grant. Thank you so much. Everybody go buy his books. Go check out his Facebook page. Find him on social media. He's amazing. He's one of the best, most legendary UFO researchers around. And it's been my honor and privilege to have him on. Thank you so much, Grant.
Thanks, Jack.